The recent fall of the Assad regime came as a surprise, for many as for the enemies of his regime. And for allies, the status quo has long been established in Syria, according to which Assad controls most of the country, with the support of Russia and Iran, while his mode seemed pretty steady. Outside observer, but it turned out wrong. Recent offensive by armed opposition in 12 days completely deprived of a gardening power and was able to establish control over its territories. And in this issue we'll talk about why did the Assad regime fall so quickly? What will happen to Syria? The civil war in Syria began in the distant 11. Then the first performance against the Assad regime began that turned into a large-scale confrontation, as many civil warriors should. In its abyss, many different forces appear at once, with different views and goals, from moderate to most radical groups, starting from those who wanted to seize power in the country, ending with party movements, who just wanted withdrawal from Syria. On top of that, war soon other countries intervened too, like the Middle East. So Europe and America, important document, which could not solve completely the civil war in Syria, but at least stopped the bloodshed, became the Astana process, launched in Kazakhstan at 17. With the participation of many parties at once, the main negotiators were Russia and wounds Turkey as major regional players. This agreement marked the beginning of action in the region, and in subsequent years the degree of tension decreased. War was freezing about outfit plots. Demilitarized zones were established. It turned out like this, that with the support of Russia and Iran, the Assad regime could still then recover substantial land. At the same time, the main threat in the form of Israel was suppressed. At the same time, the plus-minus status quo has since been maintained, with small reservations and additional documents. Russia, Iran, and Az refused, then victorious in this confrontation. Az controlled major cities and the coastal line, and it seemed that his regime was not threatened. However, the beginning of the offensive on January 27th changed everything. So the Assad government opposition group, Hayat al-Rahim, started attacking Assad's position. Speaking of the fact that this is a backlash due to regular shelling by the Syrian government. Only for first 10 hours, groups managed to take control. 20 cities and villages, the offensive developed so rapidly that the second largest city of Oleg by station were able to take literally in 3 days without feeling significant resistance by the government army. Previously at 16, Assad's Syrian army, with the active support of Russia, 6 months condemned this city for its capture. During the assault, a significant amount was destroyed. His part, it contrasts strongly with that. What happened recently? Assad's army practically did not provide serious resistance, and in the absence threw a lot of equipment, which ended up in the hands of the rebels. Along with this, offensive continued rapidly, and other opposition forces joined him, opposing Assad. Despite that Assad was trying to mess around with different forces and states, not even far from allied, what Western publications wrote about. He failed to make contact with them. The offensive began to occur from several sides, and the army remained just as helpless. The fall of the Assad regime took place on the 8th, December 20th of the 4th year after the capture of Damascus by the armed opposition. Assad himself was not in the capital, and later it became known that he is in Moscow. Let us move on to the main question. Why Assad regime, seeming rather stiff and unwavering, collapsed so fast? The opposition offensive lasted only 12 days. And the Assad army itself practically did not join with opponents in fights. First reason is the economic situation and the fall Assad's popularity. Despite that the Assad regime managed to save back in the distant 15, his position in society has not improved much. The Syrian army was not serious. Power and Russia's help to Iran then turned out to be key to save his regime. If not for them, still then, the ass would fall away. After fierce wars, Syria lost about 501,000 people killed, and 1 million Syrians have fled their homes and became refugees in Syria or Turkey. This has already dealt a serious blow to the Syrian economy. Despite saving the regime, Assad didn't really learn any lessons and kept up the good work. economy degraded. Namely, this was the first reason: discontent in society. Despite Russia's help, Syria's economy has only stagnated. At 20, he even reports on the humanitarian crisis in Syria and wrote about what at least 90% of Syrians live below the poverty line. The garden proved extremely inefficient and corrupt, what of course did not raise the loyalty of the local population. This whole situation suggests parallels of processes in Afghanistan. At 21, the situation really was similar, and corruption issues. Inefficient modes shows that the system degrades so much that such modes in the end, they cannot even protect themselves. The state of the local population was appalling. Because of the motivation to fight for the Assad regime, actually no one has appeared. Army forces were retreating, and the locals, their mass, welcomed rebels with hope for change. Illegal business in Syria also became a separate problem. In recent years, the country has become an important production center. Synthetic substances on the illegal market, which also shaken Assad's reputation. All this happened under the aegis of local elites. The second reason for the weakening of Russia and Iran, as mentioned above, the main force that saved the Assad regime got Russia and Iran, and now it became clear what that wasn't an exaggeration. Syrian opposition attack was no accident. They noticed a significant weakening of allies, Assadov region, and decided to strike suddenly, and did not lose. The punch turned out to be fatal. The weakening of Russia in Syria began to occur from 22, when Russia threw all its efforts on one country. To Ukraine, even then, there was news about Russia is withdrawing its troops from Syria, and flipped some of the technique. Along with this, important role in Syria always played back by the Wagners, Russian proxies, which were actually eliminated after killing Prigozhin. Exactly why, despite Assad's pleas to save him, Russia just had nothing to do it with. For the whole time of the offensive, there were only a few airstrikes on rebel forces. Weakening Iran in the region happened through weakening Hezbollah. It was this group that helped in the old days Assad to hold power. Israel's recent war against Hezbollah seriously shaken this organization. Many prominent leaders were killed, and also broken large forces. Recently between Israel and Hezbollah arrangements were signed, according to which the influence of Hezbollah will weaken. They were forced to move away from the Israeli border. Netanyahu even boasted himself recently that it was thanks to Israel that the Assad regime fell. And basically this is pure truth. Israel broke the balance of power not in favor of his regime. As a result of the opposition force of the Syrians understood that the Assad regime at this point in time has no one to save, and decided it was time to start an attack. Russia and the wounds really could not help Assad, except just flee the country. Summing up is worth saying that Assad regime fell pretty fast, in just 12 days. But so far Syria's future is hazy. There are serious differences among the Syrian opposition, who can show you in the struggle for power. Along with this, there is another force in Syria, Kurds, with whom part of the Syrian opposition for sure, not ready to reconcile. The civil war may continue. Regime is acidophile because of global economic problems and reduced loyalty, and also due to weakening two key allies in the region, Russia and Iran. Without them, the regime couldn't stay on its feet. Thanks to everyone who supports our channel on Patreon or a sponsorship subscription on YouTube. This allows the channel to continue to function.